welcome to KoshienCast, the world's #1 long writers film criticism podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest, Matt.
Hey!
Alright, so this is week 10 of the fall anime season. We'll be covering all sports anime that aired between December 4th and December 10th, as we do every week. One note before we dive in. This week featured the last episode of the season for Haikyu. So in this episode, we're going to talk about episode 10 of Haikyu specifically. We'll also be releasing a series or a season review for Haikyu. So look for that. We'll be talking more generally about what season 3 of Haikyu did well, what it didn't do well, what were its highlights, some things that really stuck out to us. So look for that, and pass it on to anyone in your life who enjoys Haikyu or who you think might enjoy Haikyu. And I think we had quite a fun run with it, and it's good to look back on what the series accomplished. So all that being said, how are you feeling, Matt?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about Haikyu. I'm excited to discuss Yuri.
All right, so let's just jump right in. What happened this week in Yuri on Ice?
Okay, so this week we started on Victor and Chris meeting at a pool in Barcelona. Correct?
Yes.
They're in Spain right now. Correct?
Right.
Yes. So they meet at a pool in Barcelona. All of the different skaters are already there. Essentially, all of the skaters who have made it to the finals. Yuri and Victor eventually meet up for their practice, and they end up skipping out on their practice so that they can go out shopping. There's this whole weird scene where they're looking for nuts that Yuri had misplaced that kind of doesn't really come up again. We'll maybe go into that a little bit later here. But anyway, the point is, after they do that, they go out into like a Christmas market, basically, because it's getting close to Christmas. There we find out that Victor's birthday is coming up soon. But he mentions, don't worry about my birthday, Yuri. We don't, I'm from Russia. We don't really celebrate birthdays all that much, and we don't really do much for Christmas. But anyway, Yuri gets very excited because he sees a ring shop, and they go out to buy themselves some rings. Then there's this quick interlude with a character that they had introduced earlier in the episode by the name of Otabek, a skater from Kazakhstan, who I believe is the only skater we saw this episode, who we didn't see in any of the
Correct.
other ones. And apparently we discover Yurio is being assaulted by his fans because, oh my god, he's so hot, he's finally here around us. And Otabek basically saves Yurio from being mobbed. And they go out, and Otabek actually extends friendship to Yurio because apparently they used to train together. But then after we get done with that, we have the big scene from this episode that everybody is talking about, which is the big engagement scene between Yuri and Victor. And it's a very lovely scene. We're at a church, and the two essentially exchange vows from one another. They slip their rings on one another. And then there's this... They all go out to a restaurant afterwards. Do you remember what the context of that was? Of that, why they were going together to like this weird little after party?
Well, they went out because they met up with the two women from Yuri's hometown, and they
That's
asked,
right.
"Oh, can you bring some of the other skaters?" And then eventually all of them showed up except JJ.
Yes. Well, he does show
Okay.
up at the very end. Anyway, so at this after party, we have basically Victor reveals that no, these rings aren't wedding rings; they are engagement rings. So we'll get married after Yuri gets the gold. In which case, JJ bursts in, and there's this big funny scene about where he proclaims that no, he's going to be the one to get the gold so he can get married because we discover he has a fiance. And then the episode ends with them. They're going to a party of some kind that they go to every year. And apparently it was a big issue for Yuri because he has big anxiety issues. Last year, when he went to one, he got super drunk. He had a very embarrassing situation. And the credit roll is actually a completely different song. And they're going through the phones of and looking at all the pictures that were taken during this big, silly scene of Yuri's.
Right.
And then the big reveal at the end of that episode was that apparently Yuri had actually approached Victor that year, uh, implanting the idea in his head to come by and train Yuri.
Correct.
Okay. And did I miss anything
No,
there?
that's the broad brushstrokes. That's for sure. Yeah. So I think we should just start off and talk about the thing that everyone's talking about, which is the Yuri and Victor exchanging rings. So
Right.
what did you think of that scene? How it was set up and the scene itself, and then I guess how they describe the rings after the fact.
Okay. So I okay. So fangirls, just keep your keyboards at bay or your phones or whatever. I was not big on this scene. I felt that this series has been dancing around a lot about Yuri and Victor's
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And what I don't and it's pretty obvious, these are two guys who are in a relationship. I feel like with this scene, with the fact that the series is refusing to acknowledge that these two are in fact actually, a homosexual
Yeah.
couple, this felt very cheap to me. In the sense that this is gonna sound really weird. I am this episode. I did not see a lot of difference between this and Keijo.
Okay.
Just in the sense of how they try and present their. Okay, so the boys' love aspect. Let's just face it. That's the major appeal of the series. We can both agree on
In
that,
terms
right?
of why it's popular, yeah.
Yes. Meanwhile, the big appeal about Keijo is essentially the setup. We have cute girls battling with their butts. It's being very out in the open about what it's about. And Yuri on Ice's big appeal was that they're essentially out in the
Mm-hmm.
open about it,
Right.
right? But they're not quite there yet. And I felt like this exchange was I don't know if it's emotionally manipulative, but it feels very pandering to me in the sense that because this is a series that does not want to acknowledge its main couple as being a
Mm-hmm.
couple, to me what it felt like it was saying was this is a fetish. Like this bond between two very close, unique individuals. This is something for you to ogle at. We're gonna look in at this very private matter between these two men, and like this is for you. This is not about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Um, One of the things that bothered me about it was that it felt like they were trying to do everything at once. What I mean by
Right.
that is that so they have this scene where it wasn't entirely clear to me how Victor got his ring. I might have the ring that he gave
I think
Yuri.
you
It wasn't clear to me that in
right
the jewelry store they were both buying them separately.
right
So that seemed kind of random, but okay, I'll forgive it. Um, what what bothered me was that it felt like they were trying to still hedge their bets in an engagement scene. Like, so these were these two characters exchanging rings, making promises to each other, but the promises were not specifically about their relationship, right? So they were still framing their
right
promises in terms of figure skating and about their commitment to
right
try their hardest and to skate their best and to be a good coach, whatever. So it was clear that it was about how they related to one another, but it was not. They were not specifically romantic or interpersonal commitments that they were making. Um,
right.
in addition,
I
just 1 second. Um, the other thing that bothered me about it was that afterwards, at the restaurant, you know, Victor is very open, like, oh, these are engagement rings, we're gonna get married. So that's sort of settled that from his perspective. But Yuri, the entire episode, still didn't actually acknowledge that. he didn't acknowledge what he intended the ring to be for. He never said out loud, unless I'm missing something completely, he never explicitly acknowledged that this was about being in a romantic relationship with Victor.
Okay, so that, because I mentioned to you before, I thought they brought it around at the end. See, that was the funny thing for me, because that was the part actually that I appreciated almost. Because so there's a line from Pitch It, and because I was actually getting really annoyed at this, like, oh my god, are they? Because I think what you're saying here kind of it goes in line with what I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
say, which is basically the like, because they're trying to push this couple, but because they refuse to actually acknowledge them as a couple, they have to write these vows as being incredibly
Mm-hmm.
vague. And it's about the
Yeah.
figure skating. Even though it's obvious what's going on here, they're not. They're kind of cowering away from the
Right.
subject matter. So, what got me really, really hard, and I actually laughed for a good minute after this. I actually had to pause the episode just to catch my breath because I was so taken aback by this. Is Pitchett sees the rings on both Yuri and Victor's hands. He's like, "Oh, you guys got married! Congratulations! Hey, everybody, my friends just got
Yeah.
married."
Right. Exactly.
And I pretty much died because it was like, okay, we have decided to forego pretense here. This is the first time that I feel like the series has ever had the courage to actually straight up say, okay, these two are a couple, okay?
Right. What bothers me is that if I if I didn't want to see it that way, I could still get away with it because the way that Yuri reacts is the way that any anime character would react is if they were saying, "Oh, this is such a wacky misunderstanding," and he tries to back off and explain it away. Even though the series is very, they wouldn't have this tenderly animated scene of two characters putting ring on each other's ring fingers in front of a church if they weren't making a symbolic wedding. But they
Right.
they don't actually pull the trigger. And for me, it's like you're doing everything. Why not just be honest
Right.
about it?
Right. Just be out
Hmm.
about it.
So I don't know.
But, but, no, I think I understand what you're saying here. I'm going to try and look at this from a different way because I feel the way I saw Yuri, because he never actually makes an excuse. Oh no, we're not. Because he never outright tries to
No,
say,
we're not
"Hey,
engaged.
we're
Yeah.
not getting married." No, he kind of freaks out a little bit. It seems more. It came off to me more like he was just nervous about the
Uh,
situation, and that's kind of how I took it.
that's fair. Yeah.
And I don't know. I am with you on this, where it's. You said something before the episode, and it stuck with me because I feel the same way. I feel like I should have liked this episode
Hmm.
better.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of moving away from that here for just a
Okay.
moment. So, what did you think about how they handled the ending sequence? That was kind of the other big
I
thing
honestly
that.
thought that was the highlight of the episode. I would have liked to see video, I guess, but I thought it was funny that a lot of the things that Yuri has spent the entire series learning about himself and coming to terms with about himself were there all
Right.
along. It's just that he had to get blackout drunk. Um, so he was, he was already he had this more feminine allure as part of his personality, but he just wasn't comfortable being open
Right.
about it. But you can see that very much being the case, and the way that he sort of uh, physically seduces Victor. That was something that he was
Right.
very intentional about.
It was an interesting callback because that explains why Victor was kind looking at him in the
Hmm.
first place,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess. Even though, well, I mean, again, it's also one of those things where he's watching this video of somebody who's performing his routine. It makes sense why he would have looked at it in the first place, but it adds an extra layer there because now we can go back and watch that scene and realize, oh, he was actually specifically looking out for
Hmm.
Yuri. He was already intrigued by him, and this wasn't just a whim that he was acting on. This was actually something that this was almost like it put him over the
Hmm.
edge.
I agree. The I liked that. I wish. I mean, so we have 2 episodes left of this series, and
Right.
I still don't feel like I know Victor as a character. I feel like I only know him in relation to Yuri.
Yuri.
And that's, I think, some of my hesitation about them going straight to being engaged is like, on some level, we don't know who Victor is. It feels like a jump.
I feel like I have two things to say to that. First of all, I'm gonna say I feel like this episode was getting us to know Victor a little bit more because he does have that meeting with Yurio,
Yeah.
if you recall, and he's talking with Yurio, and he says to him, or Yurio starts yelling at him, and it's like, hey, that stupid match from before, and Victor acknowledges in his head, yeah, leaving you was the right call because it made you more hungry. Had I stuck around, you would have just been complacent. And I felt like that was a bit more of a touch of what we can see. That was a bit more of a touch of his personality shining through. And it's kind of one of those slow reveals of he acts very free and very carefree and very unattached by everything. He does actually understand a little bit more than he lets
Yeah,
on.
I mean, I liked
Because
the recurring thing where he says that, for 20 years I've been so focused on skating that I haven't experienced love and I haven't experienced life. Um, and those are two things that I really experienced in a new way with Yuri and with all the people in Japan. And so that's clearly part of his attachment to it. But,
right,
I think we get to see. I feel somewhat comfortable with seeing where Victor is at currently as a character,
right,
but I don't feel like I have any understanding of where he came from. I can see where his mindset is at, but I have no idea what his mindset was before. It seems like, oh, we've got this personality in front of us, but this caricature in the past, and so that's why I feel like on some level it's a little difficult to trust him completely with this committed romantic relationship when you don't actually know where he comes from, or at least I don't.
and so here's my problem: is that if we didn't have two episodes left, I would say that this, and it still may do this. I would say that is probably the intent of the character because think of it like this: because Victor has completely come in and changed Yuri's
Mm-hmm.
life. It's been kind of a whirlwind thing for
Right.
Yuri, right? And Yuri is essentially being strung along by this man that he's
Yeah.
idolized for
Right.
years. And I'm trying to figure out the right words to explain this. Yuri, I feel like, is still seeing Victor. There's a kind of a sign in this episode because he says to Victor, "Hey, this," because Victor wants him to keep practicing his routine, and Yuri says to him, "Hey, that's not really you. I don't want you to stop being you just because you're my coach. Let's just go out shopping,
Mm.
okay?" And that's Yuri somewhat attempting to reach out to Victor and show, "Hey, I understand you a little bit better now,
Mm.
right?" And Victor's more than happy to do it. He's happy to go out with Yuri and have fun with him that afternoon. But I feel like that's also supposed to be part of this whole mystery of who Victor is also supposed to be part of their relationship because Yuri really doesn't know that much about what shaped
Exactly.
Victor.
Yeah.
And we're kind of still seeing Victor through Yuri's eyes, even though we get a lot of scenes without Yuri in them and focusing on Victor. We're still seeing him. We're still kind of viewing Victor through his
Yeah.
eyes. So I don't. If this series wasn't ending in two episodes, I would say that this would be the time for them to basically pull the rug out from underneath this and reveal something pretty major about
Right.
Victor's
I mean,
past.
they need like 5 to 8 more episodes.
Yeah, that was kind of because they really rushed through that past cup, and I was thinking about that watching these past couple episodes. Like this series really would have benefited from being a full 26 episode
Right.
series.
I mean, I don't know if you can maintain the kind of animation quality if you're trying to do it all at once, but maybe just
Right.
get up to the point of, honestly, if they'd spent the first 13 episodes and just gotten through the Cup of China, but actually spent their
Right.
time there and then taken it and maybe come back in the summer or something with the second season, I yeah, I think that would have been great. They may not have enough material to do that. I don't know. I mean, it has been a very tightly told story, and I am happy to take a tightly told anime over one that
Over
exactly
another,
one that
yeah.
doesn't know what to do with all the time on its hands. But yeah,
Days.
days exactly. But that being said, do you want to address just a couple more points because a few other things did happen in this episode before we move on.
Right. Yeah, sure thing. I did want to mention, though, that you're kind of talking about how fast it's moved through the series, kind of moving on to a separate point with that. I do feel like that's part of its appeal, though, because this is not a series that's going to that's taking a long time
Right.
and trying to lay everything out for us. Because it's getting to the
Yeah, and
point.
there's something exciting
And
to freak out about every week.
yeah, exactly. And that's one of the major things about this series is that it's done in a very something about the series feels very contemporary. Either it's due to that because of the very natural way it presents its figure skating matches, where it kind of goes in with the assumption that you might have already have some knowledge. You know, you're watching this series as if though you had just turned on the Winter
Right.
Olympics and you were watching the figure
Right.
skating routines. You may not know everything that's going on, but you know enough.
Right.
You know, you're just watching it for like the pretty routines.
Right.
But then there's also the aspect, it has a very fast-paced setting, or pacing. And it feels, like I was saying before, it feels very modern. Especially with the way how it's using, like, social media. I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but, like, there's a scene where Yuri is getting up and he's looking at through his phone, and he's looking at, like, I think it's like their Instagram
Yeah.
or something like that. And he sees all the different people and all of the different skaters. Like he sees he's posting pictures of where he's traveled to, and we have JJ who has a picture with his fiance, and they use some sort of silly filter for their photo where they're just hanging out.
Right.
They use some sort of weird little cat photo, and it's like and I don't know. It's kind of a double-edged sword. They take away some of that aspect, and I don't think I'm going to like it as much. But at the same time, it would very easily be improved if they could just give some of these scenes a little bit more meat.
Yeah. This will be an interesting one to do a wrap up on. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's one of the most popular anime, if not the most popular anime this season. It's certainly the most popular sports anime. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely.
so, all right. So there were a couple other things that happened in this episode that I want to bring up briefly. Uh, the first being Yurio and Otabek hanging out. I didn't really get much from that interaction at all. I don't know about you.
Okay, so what I kind of feel like Yurio has trouble making friends. I think we can both kind
Right.
of agree on that. This is the first time though where I feel like we've had a character who's actually reached out to him, I guess. And you know, it's somebody who Yurio can actually relate to because it's somebody he used to train with, even though he doesn't really remember that. But this is a character who still, he's a very, very serious, very, I don't know, very,
Well, they
very
refer to each
strict.
other. Otabek says, the look in your eyes, even as a 7-year-old, you looked like a soldier. And so they've clearly, I
Right.
think, if they have this sort of awkward interaction where they acknowledge that they're friends, it's only because they realize, oh, we come from the same place.
Right. And I think the deal with Otabek is that they're establishing him as somebody who doesn't have a lot of personal connections, but he's trying to find them, and he's trying to establish them where he can, and I think that will come into play during the final
Yeah.
competition.
All right. Well, we've spent a lot of time on Yuri. The last thing I'm gonna say is that JJ is still the best. So if you haven't seen the episode, even though that was clearly not the point of the episode, I was delighted by everything JJ did, and I think I'm
Yeah, no,
I'm
I'm with
probably
you.
misinterpreting the show completely. Um, so I want to move on to Haikyu. So we've got episode 10, the last episode this season of Haikyu. Um, it recaps briefly where the last episode ended, and then it jumps in with the rally. So Hinata's spike does not actually land for the winning point. It's deflected, and Ushijima is able to get it back over. Um, Ultimately, they set up. Ushiwaka is able to get another spike, almost going to even it up again. But Daichi can receives. Kageyama is able to make a strong set, and then they have a mass attack, and everyone jumps, moves forward. There's some great camera angles, and Hinata is able to jump. He sees an open space, and he spikes, and he gets the last point off the back of the court. Everyone freaks out. They realize that they've won. Everyone in Krasno starts crying and hugging. There's a couple speeches, sort of internal monologues, where various characters analyze exactly what happened. Um, Ultimately, they get awarded. They get told they're going to nationals. They all get a medal, and then Coach Ukai takes them out to dinner. Half of them fall asleep at dinner, and then they sort of flash forward to later where they're back at school and they're practicing, and they discuss the Tokyo qualifiers. Because the other two schools that they trained with, Nikoma and Fukurodani, are both competing in the qualifiers, and they haven't finished yet. So Hinata's hoping and quite confident that he'll be able to play Nikoma at nationals. And then you get news at the very end of the episode that Kageyama has been selected for the National Youth Intensive Training Camp, and everyone looks at him in shock. And that's it. And the episode's over, and that's the end of the season.
And then see you in 2 years.
Right, exactly. So the thing Matt's referring to is that the manga is not very far ahead of where we're at in the anime. So I was reading online that this scene, after the credits, where they talk to Kageyama about going to this training camp, that was in the manga about 3 months ago. So
Yeah.
they are right on the line in terms of adapting what's recently come out. Um, there's some material in the manga for the matches with that the Tokyo teams are playing in order to get through the qualifiers, and then apparently the manga has just started the first match for Karasuno at nationals. So all that being said, it will be at least a year, if not two, before we see another Haikyu series. But that's neither here nor there. I'm grateful for what
Well, we just got this one, and this one was phenomenal.
exactly. So
So
we're not gonna talk too much on the overall impact of the series because, like I said, we're going to be releasing a separate episode where we do exactly that. But this episode, Matt, why don't I just lob you a softball? What stood out to you?
it was the
Sure.
rally. Uh, Pretty much. So there is so much energy during this scene, and I don't know how else better to put it. Just everything is just so beautifully animated, and they're still finding ways to mess around with the
Mm-hmm.
camera to keep to just keep you on your seat, just keep the spectacle going during all of this. And then one of the major things as well that I really loved about this scene as well was just how many small plot beats they introduce or make callbacks
Mm-hmm.
to that just get very briefly touched upon but continue to play with your expectations and also keep you guessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of my favorite parts during this is that when Hinata makes his back attack and Ushi makes his basic manages to send it back to him, Hinata gets spiked in the face
Mm-hmm.
again, and it's never lingered
Mm-hmm.
upon. But in that moment, you have to doubt to yourself, he got spiked in the face
Yeah.
before, and we don't know what that's going to do with him. We already knew that he was tasting blood
Mm-hmm.
before, And so you see that spike happen, and you're thinking to yourself, even though we're clearly getting down to the end of the wire here, just is this the moment where they lose? Is this going to be the final moment for them? Just based off that one scene that they had spent establishing before and spent building up I feel like was almost all just for that one single spike for this, just to increase the tension during this scene. And then there are a couple other moments as well, like the setter of the team, Shirabu, when he's making his set, he thinks to himself, I joined this team because I loved watching Ushi spike, but now, I'm really frustrated right now because I can't do anything. All I can do is send it to him. And that's sort of like this moment where he realizes... It's kind of that defining moment where he realizes my method was wrong.
Yeah, I think... Well, there's almost too much that happens, and it's crazy because this rally, like we're just discussing, it basically takes up the first 7 minutes or so of the episode, just on the back and forth, and there's lots of there's flashbacks and a lot of slow mo and a lot of analysis, but it's really just one rally, but there's so much meat there. The reason that I think this series stands out and this episode stands out is that every beat is earned. There's nothing there that's random. There's nothing there that hasn't been set up by something in this season or in previous seasons. Everything that you see, you understand the context for, and you can explain it in terms of how it's been built up with all the characters. So that's the overall. A couple things that I really liked was the imagery around Ushiwaka. So there was two scenes that use sort of metaphorical imagery with him. The first, where he's trying to go up for his last spike. Before he jumps, they cut to him, and there's this sort of this dark energy around him and these purple flames licking off his body, which just communicates how desperately he wants to win this match. So, and I thought that was just a great visual that really sums up what his character's like. And then later, when he manages to successfully return a spike, and Karasuno is so frustrated by the fact that they still can't beat him, you have this imagery of all the members of Karasuno being pinned down with these speed lines pressuring them down into the ground, with Ushiwaka holding their heads onto the floor, and slowly as they work their way back, they team up and they push each other up, and they're able to push this looming giant purple Ushiwaka off their backs. And it's just such a great image that summarizes, without having to explain, well, this is a representative image of how we work as a team, but they rely on him as an... They never had to say that, because it was communicated clearly enough in everything that preceded it. And it's... I think that this first 7 minutes was a distillation of what makes Haikyu a special show, basically.
Oh, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Because, again, we see a lot of that incredible animation and just insistence on just all these small little details that build up. Like, for example, during that visual metaphor of him holding him down. Again, they could have very easily gotten away with just having, just an image of him holding them down and them, maybe slightly trying to push themselves up. But no, it's like, because you have like Hinata during the scene, like just shaking and convulsing. You can see him like raise his hand a couple times and just unable to like resist this pressure, just to show how hard this is, like this mountainous weight that's just holding them down. Or just like this camera work. Like the most striking part of this, the most striking shot of this entire rally, and I'm guessing you'll probably agree with me here, is the shot where during the very final spike where they win the match, it rotates around the entire field, or the entire court, and as it's zooming and as it's kind of swirling around, it slowly starts to zoom in on Hinata, and it decides to focus on his hand at the very end. And what I love about this is that what's important about this match isn't the fact that Hinata made the spike. this was like we are getting an entire shot of this entire team rushing up to fight this to finish this off. The fact that Hinata was the one who got the spike is actually inconsequential.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was really this group effort that did it. Because this was their whole strategy during this match, was this sort of this bum rush of how they're not going to be able to guess who's doing the spike.
Right, and that's exactly
And that
how
was,
it gets set up. Is right before that happens, they have the set. They realize that they're getting set up for an all-out attack, and Tendo realizes, I have no idea who's gonna make. Like he has this panic moment where he realizes, I don't know who's gonna hit it. I have no way of countering this right now because they set it up too well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I kind of took away from that camera rotation. And I love how it's showcasing all of the characters that never breaks camera model or character models for any of them. It's beautifully animated, and it's like it could really be any single one of these characters. It's just that it's chosen to go to Hinata. And I love after how Hinata makes the spike, we get like the shot of the ball zooming towards the camera and then swinging around as if though it's trying to get out of the way. It's like dodging it. And it's like this camera is as much of a spectator as we are.
Yeah, no, it was amazing how it ended, and I loved it. Really, I compliment this show maybe too much, but I can't imagine how it could have ended better. I loved everyone breaking into tears. I loved the seniors immediately rushing towards each other and crying. Everyone else jumping on each other and falling down. The coach was crying.
They had a great little character, like just a little moment of comedy thrown in there during the scene where like the crowd is cheering, and I just love that scene where you see Yachi, I think is her name, the secondary manager.
Yes.
And like she's passing, it's like this, like everybody else is cheering, and she just passes out in the stands, and this Tanaka's sister just very quickly catches her.
It was funny. They gave their due to pretty much everyone there and gave them their moment to respond. Some of the ones, maybe the one that stuck out to me the most was the way that the Shiratorizawa fan section responded. They weren't sad; they were confused. So what I liked was this is a parallel to when they sang their school song and established their identity as winners. Was they literally didn't know how to process the idea that they had lost. The players understood they had lost. They were in tears. The crowd was mostly confused. They're like, but we don't lose. We don't lose at volleyball.
It's like, yeah, this was a close game, but we weren't supposed to lose this. No, this was our game. This was our.
I also liked how Oikawa observes that Ushiwaka doesn't even look that upset.
Right.
So move on briefly with Ushiwaka and Tendo, how they close out sort of their relationship, their interaction in this last episode. They have a conversation which I thought was fun, where Tendo asks Ushiwaka sort of what he was thinking on that last spike, and Ushiwaka said he was just thinking about Hinata and wanting to show that he was stronger than Hinata, and so it became very personal. He just wanted to show that he was the strongest, and Tendo thought that was very funny. And Nintendo said that he was going to quit volleyball. He wasn't going to, he was a senior, so he was leaving. He wasn't going to keep playing in college, but he was looking forward to telling the world that he had been Ushiwaka's best friend. And Ushiwaka just says, all right.
All right, fine. I mean, exactly. I guess. What I really like about this scene, too, is that they could have made this, again, this is another sequence where they could have just made it just two guys talking to one another, maybe like in the locker room or something like that. But what they're doing is, even for this moment, they're cooling down and stretching. They're they're not just like chatting with one another. They're kind of like they're on the ground and they're just stretching their legs, and they're just having a very almost like a conversation that you'd have in like the gym, just chatting with your friend.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just because they still have stuff to do. They can't just sit around.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's realistic. I also like the Shiratorizawa coach. Well, I don't actually know whether I liked it or not, but the Shiratorizawa coach, he comments on he asks his assistant, would you you know he's like, would you say that Karasuno's number 10 Hinata is about the same height as me? And the assistant's like, yeah, I mean, you're about the same, I guess. And then he thinks to himself, well, you're gonna have a very tough road, and the challenges are only gonna get more significant. So he sort of earlier in the match he wanted to crush Hinata to show that volleyball
Right.
wasn't going to be rewarding, but at the end he sort of it was like we said last time. He had to learn his lesson, and he said like, well, this isn't going to be easy, buddy, and he sort of started to empathize instead of wanting to bring him down.
Just like show him that he was wrong. Like, how
Yeah,
dare you? Like, I learned my place. Why
yeah,
can't
exactly.
you?
But overall, I thought it ended about the best way it possibly could. It was very satisfying. I enjoyed seeing them just going back to practice and hanging out again and speculating about what'll happen next. I am desperately anxious for the next season whenever it comes. Hopefully, it doesn't become like a Full Metal Panic where we're waiting for a decade. But I can't imagine it
Yeah.
will because this is a pretty popular series.
They want to. This is one of Jump's biggest series right now, along with One Piece, and they don't want to let this
Mm-hmm.
die because they need a hit. So and they've needed a hit bad. So I'm hoping they don't wait too long. But at the same time, I also don't want them to rush out. I don't want them to just rush out another
Mm-hmm.
anime.
Yeah. Anyway, it's great. We'll have some more in-depth discussion on our series review. Uh, So look forward to that. And I would like to move on to March Comes In Like a Lion. All right,
Let's do it.
so the episode basically centers on Rei's match with Matsunaga. So they introduced him last time as an elderly player who might quit. He's planning to retire if he loses his match against Rei, and so Rei is sort of somewhat conflicted about that. He ends up running into Matsunaga before the match, and he sees Matsunaga at a temple, and Matsunaga is sort of resigned to the fact that he's losing. He's like, "Oh, I just want to go home. I don't even want to go, but I still want to win." And that just makes Rei more anxious because he's seeing this old man who's emotionally struggling with it. But he does eventually show up for the match, um, and although Rei is kind of confused by Matsunaga's strategy, eventually he realizes that Matsunaga has just made a few mistakes, and pretty quickly Rei is able to defeat him. They run into each other outside after the match, and Matsunaga insists that Rei take him out drinking. Because that's what the winner has to do. So Rei, being unable to say no to people, uh, goes out and pays for this old man's sake, and they talk about Matsunaga's career, about his family, about Rei and about Rei's adoptive father, and eventually they basically spend the whole evening together, and eventually Matsunaga confesses that he was pretty confident he was going to lose. He knows he's on the downswing, but he still desperately wants to win. He's not even sure if he enjoys shogi, but he loves winning at shogi so much that he can't quit. Um, so ultimately, uh, Rei has a phone conversation with Kyoko, and this sort of closes out the conversation he had with her last week, where he tells Kyoko's kind of mocking him and saying like, "Oh, I saw you won. It's probably for the best that you end his career. It's not your fault." Whatever, trying to get in his head, and he says, "No, you're wrong. Matsunaga's not quitting. He's never quitting shogi, because he loves it, and he's able to see that it's okay to not quit, and it's okay that he beat him, and he sort of defeated Kyoko for the moment." And then he talks to Matsunaga again. Matsunaga says that he can't quit shogi because if he does, he'll have to start doing chores, and he won't be able to use shogi as an excuse to not help his wife around the house, which I personally thought was pretty great.
Yeah. So this was kind of an interesting episode. I didn't really know what to think of it at first. Because first of all, this ended a lot happier than
Oh
I
yeah,
had really expected.
100% happier.
Like, I was expecting him to beat this guy and then to fall into further
Uh huh.
depression. But I guess what Matsunaga did for Rei was that he showed him that even if he loses, or even if he has to do what he doesn't want to do, things are still going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest example is Ray looking at this guy and saying like he's been playing shogi for 40 years. He's been a professional shogi player for 40 years, and that made some of the wins and defeats a little less stressful. Is like, yeah, I might lose, but I can just not quit. You know, I can
Yeah.
just not quit, and I can be like this guy, and it can be okay. He may not have the best reasons for still playing shogi, and he may be kind of an annoying old man, but like he still is. Ray can see himself in Matsunaga as someone who doesn't necessarily enjoy shogi, but he loves winning, and that's okay. You can do that.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, and like, just because you get demoted, even though you may lose a class ranking, it's fine because you can just work your way back up. It seems almost obvious when you talk about it, but I also do understand that it's one of those things that, when you're young and you haven't really experienced that, you don't really think of it
Right.
like
And I
that.
think it's also a function where he's a prodigy, right? So I think he
Right.
he has this sense that it's not okay for him to have setbacks. And this helped teach him the lesson that, setbacks are okay. You don't have to be in a direct line to still have a successful and happy career. And that, it's okay to not be the best. You can still be a pro. So, at its best, I see this. Matsunaga, it kind of serves as uh, a counterpoint to Rei's vision of himself through Soya, because Soya is, he's the Japanese champ, and I think Rei has only ever seen himself as that being the acceptable goal, that being the acceptable
Right.
person to emulate. But Soya is completely isolated. He says like, no, actually, like Matsunaga can also be a role model, even though he's kind of weird, he's
Right.
kind of ridiculous, but he has these people in his life that are still a part of it, and he can still be a pro shogi player, and that's still okay.
Right. It's like, it's not necessarily important to actually achieve a goal so much as it is just kind of working towards one. Like, because as strange and kind of obnoxious as this old man is, he does seem to live a pretty full
Mm-hmm.
life, and he's fine
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, so I thought this was surprisingly good for Ray. I appreciated the fact that the series let him defeat Kyoko. She was trying to egg him on. She was trying to break him down
Right.
emotionally because she's a terrible person. But he was very explicit. He's like, no, like, you thought you were put me in a lose-lose situation, but that's not true. We can both win. He can win by not quitting, and I can win by playing shogi the way I believe I should play shogi. Um,
Right. And I thought it was interesting that like, this also sort of shows a Ray that's growing more confident, because this he actually reached out to Kyoko
exactly.
himself. He didn't wait for her to show up and have to go on the defensive and be like, "No, I didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
do that."
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I want no. He actively pursues her and is like, "Hey, guess what? It's
Mm-hmm.
fine."
Yeah.
Though I think that also does kind of show that he may also be putting a bit too much stock in what she has to
Exactly.
say.
Exactly. He needs to know that she knows that he's strong. Um,
Right.
I don't know. I'm kind of torn. The episode didn't feel like there was a ton of meat to it, but it did feel nice. It felt like it complemented a lot of what had happened so far in the show, but I don't think it like dynamically changed anything one way or the
Right.
other.
Well, because a lot of this episode was taken up about the history of famous people from Aizu,
Yeah,
so.
I the only funny thing to me about that was that Ray was also bored by it.
Right. No, it's just like, what are you talking
There was
about?
one very very funny note where so Matsunaga was drinking and he'd been going on and on about Japanese history, and then out of nowhere he changes subjects and Ray freaks out. He's like, what are you doing? You're just changing subjects all the time. And there's a note like Ray doesn't have experience with people drinking, so he doesn't know how drunk people talk. Um, overall, I thought it was fun and nice, and it definitely took the character in a place that was less destructive than
Right.
it could have been. But I don't know.
Uh,
I thought it was solid, but nothing to write home about.
right. Real quick, just before we move on, I just wanted to ask you one thing. What did you think about the fact that they played the cat song
Oh my
again?
gosh, low that I was baffled by the fact that they need it was at the break between the first and second chapter, and without any justification, Hino was nowhere to be seen. No Momo, no nothing. They just break into the untranslated cat shogi song again. 3 episodes in a row. The first time was great. The second
Yep.
time was justifiable. This time I'm like, they're gonna do this every week.
Yeah, well, because I think the song is portraying like the different
Yeah.
pieces. Because this week I think was the king.
Well, it
And
wasn't the
I
king. It
think
was the lance.
oh, it was the
But
Lance. My
yeah,
bad.
so either way, I
Uh,
understand the concept that it has different characters every week that it's describing. I just don't understand, one, why it's not translated, and two, why they're doing it at all. It's like, why not just release it as a separate thing with the song? Like, who's watching this to watch a cat song about shogi? I don't know.
okay, so this was my theory on it because the end of last episode, if you waited past the preview for the following episodes, for this week's
Yeah,
episode, they mentioned that they were selling Nikaido's cat book as a separate
like in real
product.
life.
Yeah, like in real life, they were going to be selling that as an instructional shogi thing. So I think the reason why they keep playing this song is to help advertise that book because this is not really a series that is well suited for merch,
Yeah.
and and so this is kind of a passion project, I believe, of the author of the manga because from what I understand, the author tends to get very involved with the anime production. And so I think this is their whole we need to make money on this somehow.
Okay. Well,
And I think that's why they keep playing this song over and
great.
over again.
Well, whatever. You wanna talk about those ping pong girls and how scorching they
Yeah,
are?
let's do that. Yeah, let's say okay. So Scorching Ping Pong Girls. So we begin this episode already on the second game between Kururi and Koyori, and as you could probably expect, Koyori is not doing very well against Kururi. That is going to be a name that is going to be really difficult to
Mm-hmm.
alternate between. By the way, I'm just throwing
Great.
that out there. Um, and what happens is that eventually we get a scene where Koyori thinks back to a time with Agari where apparently, and I'm going to quote the
Mm-hmm.
series here, that thing we did to grope the best spot possible.
Mm-hmm.
And what they are of course talking about before your minds go anywhere else is the fact that they're looking for the sweet spot on the
Mm-hmm.
paddle. So the best place for Agari to actually hit the ball back. And once Agari is able to do this, she is able to actually reliably knock back the ball to Karuri. And Karuri doesn't actually know how to. She's so used to winning after that shot, she's not used to actually having to attack
Mm-hmm.
back after she uses that
Yeah, the
shot.
curve drive.
Yeah, the curve drive, that's what it's called. And after this happens, we learn that Karuri is pretty torn up about the fact that she might actually lose this because she's really terrified of losing
Mm-hmm.
Zakuro. Because the curve drive was actually a maneuver she had developed with Zakuro in order to like she had a natural curve to her drives anyway, and so rather than trying to work on fixing it, Zakuro recommended that she try and work it into her strategy. And so then we have it's so Koyori makes up the difference. They're on the very final set of games. It's a 2-2, and Karuri decides to try and evolve her shot during the
Classic.
game. Yeah, classic sports anime here. And she does finally manage to do it at the very end of the match, but it's no use because Koyori manages to still counter the
Mm-hmm.
shot. And so Koyori ends up winning the game, and then they all say their goodbyes, and that's pretty much the end of the episode.
Yep. Uh,
Did I miss anything there at the end of the
no,
episode?
I mean, oh, I know what you're talking about.
There's no, I wasn't talking about anything. I'm just saying that there's all the girls basically say goodbye, and that's we got it. I think next episode we have Training Camp from Hell coming
Okay,
up.
so I'm gonna identify the one thing you forgot, which was maybe the low point of the episode for me, at the very
Okay.
end, where Pendulum,
Oh, I know what you're going for.
Pendulum, she rocks back and forth, and which apparently causes Mune's breast to bounce up and down for no reason. And then they comment that there are still mysteries in the world. And so that was maybe the dumbest use of superpowers in an anime I've ever seen. That this is the first introduction of magical realism into the world of Scorching Ping Pong Girls is making Mune's breast bounce uncontrollably. Uh,
For no, because I didn't even make the connection between Pendulum making her do that,
yeah,
and because I just thought this was just a random shot because it's not established at all. I just thought they decided, okay, time to make her breast jiggle. It's been a while.
exactly. It was so.
The animators got
Yeah,
bored.
it was unfortunate, as is almost everything having to do with Mune. Um, I was not too keen on this episode. Um, it continued with some of the unfortunate trends from the rest of this match, where they have a lot of ambition for how much ping pong they're going to show, but when you actually break it down, it's a lot of still shots that are panned over with speed lines, and a lot of shots that just show the score going up back and forth and other people reacting to it, or ping pong sound effects being played over still shots without any actual animation. Um, Clearly, we just have to resign ourselves to the fact that the animation's never coming back. Um, but I couldn't really get into it. I thought it was a pretty boring that there was that each character only had one strategy the entire match, where Karuri's strategy was, well, I'm going to use my curve drive like I always do, and Koyori's strategy was like, well, I'm just going to use my forward smash until it works. Now, and yes, they did take some time to explain why eventually using the quote unquote sweet spot made such a big difference. But it, I don't know. I didn't buy the fact that that was the only way that Koyori could have won. That there was no other approach to take. There was no. She only used a forehand smash the entire match. Why didn't she try literally any other type of response? That's what got to me.
Okay, I can agree with you on that. I did appreciate though that I have no problem with Karuri not knowing what to do outside of her curve drive.
Yeah.
Because this is a character who has been very well established as being very clingy with her friend Zakuro. The fact that she wants to win these matches just using her friend, the technique that she learned from her best friend that she feels like she needs to earn to keep. I thought that I liked that. And I liked the fact that she doesn't know how to counter Koyori. And she realizes that she's just been complacent with this. She's been complacent with her game. It's actually a very similar twist that we saw with Agari few episodes
Well, at the
back.
beginning, yeah.
And I liked that they brought that back because now she's learning during the game, okay, I have to improve myself. This is like I can't just let my friendship with Zakuro end here. I actually need to work towards it. And of course, that was all in her head. And I don't mind that either. And I also disagree with you on the animation not coming back because I thought they brought it back hard with the final showdown with that final
Well,
shot.
sure, that
Because
was one shot. Like, I mean, the trend was still there.
the trend was still there, sure, but that still is way more than we've gotten the back. And I thought there was still a lot more energy during that final scene than what we have gotten from the series up to this point for a
You're
while.
not wrong.
Like I love there's the shot I love when Zakuro actually manages to get this shot to work. I love this triple cut we get of her just her insane wind up where she's like leaning
Oh, you
back.
mean Karuri?
Oh, Karuri, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's when she knocks a shot, we get a side view of the table, and we see the ball actually rotate around the table and actually get like really near the camera and then just angle right away. And it's like again, this is more of the shots I loved from when the series started. And you know what? I actually kind of liked Koyori's return.
Do you so you like I didn't like the fact that she finally evolved her curve drive within the match, and then Koyori just did the same thing she'd been doing and won anyway.
Well, okay, so here's the thing: she manages to evolve it. She knows what to do. That doesn't necessarily mean she knew how to perfect it. So I actually like the fact that it still fails. It's just on the base. She knows what to do now because again, this is a practice game. Now I know it doesn't really matter for this game, but for the series, but I'm going to maintain the fact that this was she won. She didn't win, but she evolved her shot, but it's still lost for her because again, she just figured out how to do this.
So what really bothered me about the episode, and I guess I'm just gonna have to get used to it, is the consistent Yuri baiting. Like
Oh, okay, yeah, no, that was garbage.
The biggest example, of course, like you alluded to at first, was with Koyori and Agari, where Koyori just chooses to phrase things in the most awkward way possible.
Right, like who speaks
Exactly. She's like,
that?
"Hey, Agari, it's gonna come in handy. You know, that time we groped for the spot that felt best."
Yeah, right.
That's such an awkward way to phrase something that, of course, is just there to get. And all the characters are like, "Whoa, you were groping each other? What?" And
yeah, it's like that's not a natural way in which people speak. You're clearly trying to write this. You thought of a funny gag in your head, and you're trying to force the dialogue to fit that rather than vice versa.
Yeah, it was awful. And then it was paired with the fact that at the end of the match, of course, Koyori like collapses from exhaustion, which isn't really earned because yeah, she's been sweating, but like for her to physically collapse, that came out of nowhere.
Okay, no, I actually disagree with that because I didn't take that as her collapsing from exhaustion. I took that as the intensity of her shot. Basically, she had to force that shot so hard that the sheer momentum, or like the sheer force of her hit, was basically threw
Okay,
her
well,
over.
either way, it was just a justification to get her in Agari to be cradled in Agari's arms. Um, the same way on the opposite end, they had Kururi collapse and Zakuro just lies down on her. Um, to show that they're really they're such good friends. It's this show is this show is just trying to put a thin veil over its cheap Yuri baiting, and it's one thing if these characters had relationships that were earned on any level, but they aren't. They're just random, and they just look at each other and blush and talk about wanting to make one another doki doki all the time, but none of it feels earned or justified.
I don't know. Again, I didn't really mind it in this episode. I guess just on the basis that I do buy Karuri and Zakuro's relationship. I guess, and I realized it was kind of obvious that as soon as she was like, "No, I have to win this match in order to see Zakuro smile," like I understand that obviously Zakuro wasn't going to just abandon Karuri after everything they've been through. But I don't know.
Yeah, it was
I don't.
okay. Honestly, what frustrates me is that the relationship between these random opponents is better justified than the one between the two main characters.
Right, and that's fair. And not only that, I will also say that it if this was just one-off things, it would be
Mm-hmm.
fine. But the fact that it's coupled with this awkward dialogue
Ugh.
and Mune Mune's apparently magic
Yeah.
breasts, that it starts. I can understand why that can start to get to be hard to
Yeah.
ignore.
So speaking of shows that are hard to ignore, I'm going to talk about Tiger Mask. All right.
Sure.
So Tiger Mask episode 10. Finally, we get the match we've all been waiting for between Tiger Mask and Mr. Question. Um, Tiger Mask makes several attempts at the beginning of the match to bend Mr. Question to force him into submission holds. But Mr. Question does yoga because he's from India, so he can just bend any which way, including
Uh,
twisting his spine 180 degrees, because that's a thing. Um, Eventually, they're fighting, and Mr. Question has the upper hand, and he sort of taunts or eggs on Tiger Mask, and he says, "If there's a tiger inside you, show it to me." And just at that moment, Tiger Mask looks and sees that Yellow Devil is watching the match, and he remembers, "Oh yeah, I'm angry at Yellow Devil." So then he gets his strength back, and he drop kicks Mr. Question, and then suplexes him like 3 times in a row and wins. Um, he tells he asks Mr. Question, like, "Who are you?" And Mr. Question says, "I'll tell you later," and then he leaves. It cuts to it's the Ace, otherwise known as Tanahashi, fighting Poseidon, the random guy. And Poseidon punches him like he has a sucker punch, but then it's the Ace uh, wins easily. And that's the end of the match. There's really not a lot of justification except for the fact that Poseidon is revealed to have been another New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestler who always loses, and he was just there for the money. Whatever. They cut
right.
back to Mr. Question, who explains that he is a disciple of the original Mr. Question, and he wanted to test the strength of Tiger Mask to see if he'd be strong enough to overcome GWM. He says he isn't strong enough yet because Tiger Mask still doesn't have a quote unquote killer move. Um, and
Right.
then they finish off by showing Ryu dressed up as Dragon Young, great name, fighting Yellow Devil. Ryu's attacks do literally nothing and are incapable of forcing Yellow Devil to move at all. Every time Yellow Devil strikes him, Ryu goes flying, and he ends up just knocking him out and standing on him to win. And that's the end of the episode. So it sets up that it's the Ace is gonna get murdered by Yellow Devil next week, and Tiger the Dark and Tiger Mask are both going to fight each other.
I love the fact that they have to set up uh it's the Ace's own personal grudge against Yellow Devil, as if though that's going to end up
Yeah,
meaning
exactly. Like he's going
anything.
to avenge Ryu.
Right? It's like, no, we have to root for it's the Ace because of because of Ryu's like terrible defeat, and it's like he's he's gonna lose. How is Tanahashi supposed to be any better than
Mm-hmm.
Ryunosuke?
Well, so that's the thing. In part is because Tanahashi is a real wrestler in Japan, so he's
Oh,
based directly on an actual pro wrestler in Japan. He and Rainmaker are the two real wrestlers in this show that are somewhat main
okay,
characters. So that's the reason he had to at least win the first match, and he has to be like a super popular good guy. Um, because I
okay.
was wondering going in, like, why did they waste Fukuwara? It should have been Fukuwara should have been the one fighting Poseidon, so we could see him do something. But they wasted
Right.
Fukuwara because they needed Tanahashi to win because this is all promotional material for New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Okay, okay, interesting. Um, Okay, so that actually explains a lot. I did not
Yeah.
realize that. So I have to say, Rio's fight against Yellow Devil, I did like one moment during that match, which is when Yellow Devil hits him with the
Mm-hmm.
lariat, and they actually give him a decent, like, he spins several times in midair before finally
Yeah, it's
crashing
really well
down.
animated. You can feel all the hits on Ryu.
Right, but just on
Exactly. I mean,
Ryu.
that's the hilarious thing to me is that Ryu is a strong human being, but for some reason he can run up and punch Yellow Devil, smack him. He can try to grab him from behind. Yellow Devil doesn't move an inch. He just
Yeah,
I'm
literally,
like, how
like,
heavy is
he.
he that Ryu can't even pick him up? Ryu knows how to do a suplex, but he literally couldn't
Right.
get Yellow Devil an inch off the ground. Does that mean he's just heavier? Like how can he
I,
not be picked up?
right.
That was they
Uh,
just had to make Yellow Devil so strong that he can't be picked up by people.
yeah,
Because that's a thing.
apparently. Or, like, I guess, I don't know, maybe he's just, like, shifting his
I
weight
don't think you
down.
can do
I don't.
that without moving.
Yeah, I don't
um,
know. There is one thing I will say, and this is actually something I'm kind of missing. I'm sorry, I'm missing from the match against Red Death
mhm.
Mask, which is this. This isn't brutal
What, Yellow
enough.
Devil?
Well, not just Yellow Devil, but a lot of these
Oh yeah.
matches, because during Red Devil or Red Death Mask, we really got to see some really gruesome
Hmm.
moments. And I don't know. It feels like since then the series has gotten very
Yeah, it's
quaint.
cartoony.
Like, yeah, it's cartoony, and like there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't know. Like, these are some very brutal attacks that these people are using on one another, and I don't know. I'm not generally the one who cries like more
Well, yeah,
blood,
but the
but
reason that it's weird is that they already went there, but they don't go back.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, they went there with Red Death Mask, and they're kind of shying away from it now. We also kind of got that with the match versus Yellow Devil, where he literally chops the previous mentor across the chest, and his chest bursts open.
Hmm.
And I feel like all of a sudden it decided it needed to like get a little more tame.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's tame or they just can't afford to be as explicit in what they're animating. It just
Right.
takes too much. What did you think of the one thing I want to say? There's really not much content here, to be honest. The one
Right.
thing I wanted to say about the interaction with Mr. Question that made me laugh was that they needed to take the time at the end of the match for Tiger Mask to say, "Who are you?" And Mr. Question says, "I'll tell you later." And I'm like, "Oh man, he's gonna get murdered. He's not gonna be able to tell it." Because that would make sense. Why take the time to say, "I'll tell you later"? Nope.
Right.
They just cut to another scene of
No,
them
no.
sitting down together. He's like, "Okay, I will tell you now."
I mean, I guess it's just like, well, I'm not going to tell you right now. We're right in the middle of the ring. I don't want to
Ex-
expose my identity to all these people. No, I'm trying to keep it
exactly,
secret.
but it's just another function of these bad sports shows where they set you up like, "Oh man, there's going to be intrigue." It's like, "Nope, it's the
Right,
simplest
and then
solution
nothing.
possible."
uh, yeah. And again, Mr. Question is another one of those characters where I feel like I can't fully appreciate it because he was trained by Great
Yeah.
Zuma, and I have no idea who Great Zuma is because he was a character in the original
Yeah, this is
series.
clearly supposed to be meaningful. But hey, I don't really have much else on this one.
Okay, so yeah, why don't we just move on to
Okay.
All Out? Okay, so this episode begins. First of all, I'd just like to point out the title of the episode, which is "I Ate Too Much Shaved
Mm.
Ice." Um, I just thought this was very entertaining with like the episode names of all the other series that we've been
Right.
covering. It's like because it's like battle of ideologies, like the final match, and it's like I ate too much shaved
Exactly.
ice. But anyway, so all of the entire team has now taken up training on the
Hmm.
beach, And we get a lot of fun interactions with the team there, which we'll get into during our actual discussion. But they're all training on the beach, doing various different exercises, either jogging or carrying each other, etc. And then the coach proposes to them, look, we got 147 days until the prelims, right? Seems like a lot of time, I realize, but look at it like this. If we train 2 hours a day, that actually only gives us 13 days of actual practice. So you guys got to figure out what you want to do. And Sekizan proposes to him, well, we can train harder if we just do this, if we come to the beach here every day. Is that okay with you? And he goes, yeah, fine, whatever. What do I care? And then after that, we get a bit of an interaction between Urahano and Gion. And Gion, because Urahano is still pretty shaken up from the previous match against Sagami. And Gion approaches him, and he starts digging with him, because that was part of their training, was digging. And he asks him, like, hey, so I'm kind of wondering about my position. I'm kind of thinking about wanting to shift it around, and they start talking for a little bit, and we find out that Oharano as was alluded to during the Sagami game, he had a younger brother that he felt like he discouraged from playing rugby, and that was because he they played on the same team, and whenever it came time to call out for another player, uh, Oharano got called rather than the brother. And the brother really, really loved to play rugby, but never got the chance to. And so there's this big discussion between Gion and him where Oranaho speaks to him and says, like, hey, so do you actually like this game? And Gion's like, actually, kind of not really, because I never actually get to play. So that's kind of why I'm hoping to change my position around. And this sets off
Oharano.
Oharano. Oharano. Yeah, I know I've said it differently every time, okay? So, Oharano gets really angry with Gion and explains, I'm only playing this game because until my brother decides he wants to start playing rugby again, because I took that from him. And so then we kind of cut away from the beach, and we have it's their day off from practicing, and Gion and another member of the team go out to Ryoji Academy, which they were the district champions. They were the ones who actually beat Sagami High,
Right.
correct? Right. And so they go out to scout Ryoji Academy because they got nothing else going on. And so the position that Gion has been considering has been a flanker. And so his teammate points out to him, hey, you should watch their flanker then. This guy, Sakido, who's apparently super popular with the girls, who he has an entire crowd there just cheering for him. And then as they're watching, they're approached by a hooded man who says, I'm actually on the team, but I have an ice cream headache, basically. I have
brain freeze.
Yeah, brain freeze, that's it. And that's why I'm not out there right now. And that's pretty much where the episode ends.
Yeah, he ate too much shaved ice.
He ate too much shaved ice.
Yeah, I didn't feel like much happened in this episode. I guess in terms of the content, the most significant thing was understanding a little bit more about Oharano.
Right.
But I still didn't feel like there was enough there to really flesh it out. It's like, okay, you're a lot better than your little brother at rugby, and eventually he stopped playing rugby, but, it's not like he died or anything. He just stopped playing rugby.
Stop.
And so you keep playing rugby, so he will again eventually. I don't.
I guess in his head it's like a self-inflicted punishment, because the reason why his brother stopped was because his talent was what kept him from being able. He was basically living under his brother's shadow, and he got sick of it, so he stopped. And so Oharano states that he wants to, he's trying to make it up to him, because he feels like because of his talent, he owes it to his brother to keep pursuing it.
I don't know. I mean, it was fine, but I feel like they spent a lot of time on it, and it was 50% implied already. I feel like they spent a lot more time to go into how it came about than they needed to. It was pretty obvious. It was pretty kind of surface level. And I also kind of resented the fact that immediately after that, Guillaume says like, "Oh well, I don't actually dislike rugby. I'm gonna be the best, and I'll show you." Ha ha ha. It's sort of like, okay, well, so is he just
I,
lying or?
he's lying somewhere. It's like, yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I really would have preferred it had they stuck with his original thing of, yeah, no, actually, I'm kind of disliking the
Mm-hmm.
game. Like, yeah, I kind of don't like it because I'm not able to do
Mm-hmm.
anything. So yeah, I'm kind of getting turned off of
Yeah.
this.
And if they had actually
Um,
committed to that, that would have been interesting, but they didn't. Um,
right, and that
there
was kind of
were
the
there were
problem.
large segments of this episode which were just sort of goofy hijinks on the beach. There
Right.
wasn't really anything
Uh,
that I like. It was a lot of shots of Hirota um, being fat, and and people being like, "Oh well, he sure is fat, but whoa, they're gonna do sumo, and now he has an advantage because he's huge." But it turns out he actually doesn't, because if you go low, then you can win. And it's like, all right, great. I didn't really get much from that.
they had one kind of funny gag with that, which is when they were doing the carrying practice. There's that one member of the team who's like, "Hey, sorry, I need a partner. Anybody want to partner up?" And then
Hirota, yeah,
Harada, he approaches him. He's like, "Hey, I'll be your partner." And then he just very politely goes, "No,
yeah,
thank you."
yeah, that was good.
That got a laugh out of me. Had they done like this overreaction, like, "Oh no, 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 no," it's like that would have been
Yeah.
kind of dumb. But I
Um,
like how just very simply and politely he just goes, "Oh no, no, thank
yeah,
you."
I liked the very end too when they're doing research on the best flanker, and they observed Sekito, and it was a really well animated match. The match they're observing with him um, being able to tackle so low that he takes people's feet out from under them, the way that Guillaume wants to, and also that even when he's surrounded, he can dive through other people's legs. So he actually uses
Right.
the fact that he's short to as an advantage, which obviously is inspiring to Guillaume. So I thought that was well done and it was interesting. But honestly, the the amount of the number of instances in which something was interesting in this episode was pretty much confined to the very end where they were observing Ryoin. Excuse me,
Right.
Ryoji, whatever the name was of
Yeah.
of the academy, and so that was interesting, but there wasn't much else to it for me.
Yeah. So, kind of going along with that, do you want to go on to something else that didn't have a whole lot going
Yeah,
on?
great intro for Days. Your favorite show and mine. All right, so this is the second to last, if you can believe it. It's the second to last episode of Days. All right, so we're moving eventually towards the end of this match with Keijo. Um, so uh, a lot of boring stuff happens. There's like it's like every somehow this match has gone on for this is the fourth episode for this match,
Yeah.
and they continue the trend where they have a lot of near misses at the goal. So Kai on Keijo almost scores again, but Kimishita does a slide tackle to disrupt it, and everyone freaks out because slide tackles exist. Um, and then towards the end, Usui is about to stop Maru from scoring, but he collapses from exhaustion randomly in the last second of the game. He well, not the last, quite the last second, but in the last few minutes of the game, he just randomly collapses from exhaustion, and Keijo scores, and they tie the game. So, with just a couple minutes left, Tsukamoto motivates the team to strike back, and he eventually receives the ball. Tsukamoto does, and he gets fouled right in front of the goal because Kai grabs his shirt and pulls him to the ground, of course, because that's a strategy. So Seiseki gets a free kick, and Kimishita tells everyone that he's going to pass to them, but he doesn't. He just scores. Like, again. And so he manages all 3 of the goals that Seiseki gets are through free kicks by Kimishita, which is ridiculous.
To be fair, the series does point out that's ridiculous.
Sure, of course. There's just
they said that's pretty uncommon, the fact that a school would win by getting a hat trick with 3 penalty kicks.
Yeah, they know it's ridiculous, but also there's no justification for it because you've never seen a free kick from Kimishita before, and now he's the only scorer.
He's the one that they're all doing he's the one who's doing all the free kicks. And I love the fact that they have to build up this whole thing about Kimishita, about it's like, no, he's the type of guy who will do the thing that's best for the team and not sacrifice, and will sacrifice his personal glory. And it's like, I thought that was Tsukamoto's thing.
Also, how are they trying to make that argument when he scored all 3 goals? Everyone's like, oh, you should probably pass. Just make a pass on this free kick and we'll, have the forwards up close so we can try and score. No, the best thing for the team is if I'm the only one who scores. I don't know.
Yeah, and not only that, but the last goal, I don't understand how he made this last goal. He made an arcing shot to the side that curved in the air. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, because, I don't really follow soccer at all.
Yeah,
but
that's not how a normal shot is made. And it's pretty similar to the first free kick he made, which was a curveball. And they were like, oh, that's a 1 in 100 shot. That's crazy. How could he possibly do that? And then he just does it again.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
It sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, really, moving on. Real quick, though, I did want to point out as well that the episode title of this episode, it's actually, I think, supposed to be the episode title for the next one.
Yeah, I think that might just have been a mistake in translation somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I don't quite understand, because the title of this episode was, I'm a member of the team too. And then in the preview for the next episode, we have Ubakata commenting like, hey, I'm a member of this team too. And it's like, I think that was supposed to be the next episode.
Yeah, exactly. So...
But anyway,
next week we get to see them set up for season 2.
Season 2. We know they haven't announced it, but it's happening.
Boy.
I'm just waiting for the announcement.
You want to tell me all the great things happening in the world of Keijo?
Yeah, sure thing. So, okay, so first of all, a slight correction from last week. I said that Aoba, Non, and Nozomi were all on the same team. They are not. This is actually, it was Aoba and Non are on the same team, but they're on the same team with Usagi and the muscle girl that Non beat to advance to the elite class. And so what happened? So the other team's strategy, so Suruga's Academy's plan is to separate them all out into one-on-one matches, because apparently the problem before with the first match was that they didn't do that. Even though, I don't know, whatever. And what happens is, so they all get singled out, but Aoba had this great plan that she went through before the match started, because they're on a seesaw land. So they're standing on a bunch of planes, so it has a pivot to it, essentially. You can it can move around like a seesaw. So everybody separates onto different parts of the land, and then right when they're all seemingly cornered, Aoba tells them all to jump and stomp on the land, and it sends 2 of their players launching. And that just leaves the 2 players. I didn't even bother to name the other 2 because they're so unimportant that it doesn't matter. So the 2 that are left are Hoho and Sanai and Kurogiri Ayase, whose special technique is that she hypnotizes herself so that her butt becomes as hard of steel, basically as hard as the muscle girl's butt. And she manages, or Hoenn manages to knock off Muscle Girl like it's nothing, because she's an unimportant character. And so that leaves it as a 3-on-1 match. Aoba suggests that the other 2 girls, so Non and Usagi, go off to deal with Kurogiri while she deals with Hoenn. And Hoen's like, there's no way you can stand up against me. Like, I'm this incredible player. And then Aoba's like, no, I actually have all the data on all the elite players on my team, so I can use all of their techniques.
Oh, really? How did she acquire all that data?
Oh, by butt touching. Yes, that is what she refers to as the Gates of Booty Lawn,
Mm.
which does have a pretty amazing visual metaphor where she summons a giant bunch of butts to surround her, and she reaches out with her hand and mentally touches them, which apparently gives her I guess it's like this tick that she has so that she can get into the right mindset so she can use these attacks. And so Hohoen has difficulties dealing with all of these different, because she's basically a very varied fighter. She doesn't know what to
Mm-hmm.
do, and it's because she can just keep mixing up her attacks. So Hoenn is forced to drag out her ultimate technique, which is the Perky Pile
Oh no.
Piper. This is where she twists her nipples super hard and basically turns her breasts into drills.
Ugh.
And so she knocks into Alba, and then Alba's like, I don't have a proper counter for this. I don't know what to do. And so as and she's like, one more hit's gonna probably knock me out. And then as she's about to use the Perky Pile Piper again, Non jumps in and knocks her down, and basically knocks her boobs out of the way with her own boobs, with a boob dunk. And what's revealed is that Kurogiri, she can only hypnotize herself for so long before her butt goes back to normal, and so Usagi has to sacrifice herself in order to take her down with her. And so it's Non and Alba against Hohoen. And in a kind of an interesting scene, and when I say interesting, I mean a little funny, is where she's using the Pile Piper against them, and they're both blocking with their butts, and they can do it with a butt per boob.
Ugh. I hate this.
It's almost over. Okay, and so what happened? And so, but this does Non does manage to get blown away, and so as she's using the Perky Pile Piper, as she's building it back up, Non manages to reach out her foot as she's flying into the water to knock the plane, to knock the land, so that she loses some balance, so she can't get the Perky Pile Piper correctly. So Alba sees that as to be the perfect time to counter with her own boob dunk, and after this, the two go flying across the land. They both land in the water about roughly the same time, right? And so it seems like the match is a draw, so they have to go to the video replay. And what they at first it looks like Alba won the match because Hohoen fell into the water first. She was the one who reached the water first. However, because her Perky Pile Piper was still going, the force of this technique was causing the water underneath her to create a bunch of air pressure underneath her, so that pushed the water down ever so slightly, so that Alba fell in first. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. So now, good old Satoshi Academy is down one. They're basically tied right now. They have one win in their favor and one loss.
Hmm.
Okay, and so this is my big issue with the episode. I hate it when series try and do this, where they're trying to establish conflict here and establish pressure because they're down, they lost their game, and so now it's all tied up. But they couldn't just let the characters lose. They had to establish Alba as being on equal ground as Hohoen, but they just ever so slightly she lost. If you get what I'm saying
I
here.
guess.
So basically, it's like the series is too afraid to ever say of any of its title characters that no, the main team can never really lose because they're that good. But it was just this one stupid BS reason that they lost. But don't worry, it was really a win for both Alba and Non. And I thought that was a real cop out for them. Because again, the series really only cares about Miyata and Nozomi. And so, but they're still trying to give equal credit to Alba and Non, or really just to Alba because Non's kind of worthless. Who basically kind of lucks into her wins. And I don't know because they did something very similar with her win against, or with her loss versus Kuchisaki. When she went up against her, it's like no, she had to pull out an illegal technique to beat you, Alba, and like that's the only reason why you lost. Here, again, they're pulling that same crap again, where it's, no, she didn't really lose if they had, but just this one, and it's just, it wouldn't bother me so much, but it was like by a hair. They had to make it so close, but oh no, it was, Alba really won this match. Anyway, I can see you don't really care, so let's just go on to Long Riders.
I don't know where you would get that. That's totally unfair. I just, at this point, the nuances of Keijo are so deep and butt-centric that they're beyond me entirely. So speaking of, another show with lots of really important nuance, Long Riders. So the episode starts out with Saeki, who is a girl that exists, and she observes Amy riding to class on her bike, and then they sit down next to each other in class and talk about bikes. And that's it. Eventually, they take the girls all go out on a 100 kilometer ride to show Amy that she can ride 100 kilometers, and they stop off for ice cream, of course, and eventually ride 100 kilometers, and they say, look, Amy, you did it. And then immediately, they cut to Amy packing up to go do the Azuri Autumn Ride, which is 160 kilometers, and they drive there, which we'll get into, and stay at the hotel and have a bath. And then Amy is really worried, but Aoi tells her that it's going to be okay, and she says, oh, you're right. And then they start the race, and Amy declares that their goal is to have fun and stay the course together as friends.
Right, and I mean that's pretty much it.
That's
right.
It. That's the whole thing.
Okay, good. I didn't think there really was. Okay, so let's just talk about Sayake real quick, okay? Okay, so I think what they're going to try and do with this is that in the very last episode, she's going to pop back up as basically she's going to be Amy's counterpoint. You know, she was Amy at the beginning of this wonderful journey in her discovery of bikes. Amy's going to go from being the newbie to the senpai. And she's going to teach Sayake about, you know, the joys of biking, just like Hinako did for her.
Great. Yeah.
It
was what...
Right, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Who cares?
I mean, what bothered me was that they treated this as a character that Amy had an established relationship with, even though she's never appeared before. Because they're too lazy to actually force them to have enough dialogue as an introduction. So they have to say, like, oh, hey, person I know, randomly, let's talk about the fact that we already know each other. And just pretend like the audience is too stupid to notice.
I love that cold opening where you see her riding by, when, you know, you see Sayaki walking along, and all of a sudden Amy rides by, and then the camera starts to linger on Sayaki as she watches Amy drive by, and it's like, oh, okay, so we're establishing a new important character. And then it's like the first 3 or so minutes focus on her.
Gone.
And then it's just nothing. She just disappears.
It's amazing. This show is bad in very surprising ways. There's a couple things that I thought were funny. There's really no content here, surprisingly. Again, there's nothing. So the only thing I can concentrate on is the random stupid throwaway lines they try and get away with. Like Amy's mom, at one point, they're eating dinner as a family, and her mom says, Amy, you sure have been eating a lot recently. And and Amy's like, well, it's okay because, like, I've been cycling a lot more, so I work it off. And then her mom and sister are, like, super suspicious about that as an explanation, like, oh, I'm not sure exercise will actually help you work off calories. You know, like, they treat this whole exercise thing as suspect.
I think the joke, and I don't know if because the series is not properly communicating this, I think the gag that they're getting at is that they think Amy might be pregnant.
What?
Well, because, she's eating a lot, because now she's eating for two, and she does all this weird stuff where she's just sort of sing-songing to herself, and, like, catch her at weird moments, and she's, like, super embarrassed about it.
Oh.
I think that might be the
I thought the
joke.
joke was supposed to be that they didn't think she was actually cycling as much as she said she was. That, like, she's got whatever, they don't really believe her that she's going to actually ride 100 kilometers because that's so out of character with what they know of her. But also, why is that a joke? And who cares?
Yeah, it's not really a joke. Because they keep establishing, they were trying to make this a recurring gag where her sister walks in on
and it's
her
never,
during
it's never funny.
Like, it's never funny, but she walks in on her and just doing something slightly strange, in private. Like, nothing even, like, incriminating, but, just acting a little silly in private, and, like, you're weird.
Yeah, exactly. Another moment I wanna highlight is when they are driving to the autumn ride, and Yayoi. They all comment on what a good driver Yayoi is, apparently because she's capable of changing lanes, and that shocks everyone. But they're like, oh wow, Yayoi, you're so good. And she's like, yeah, I'm a good driver, but my boobs get in the way. And then they have a full shot of the seat belt in between her boobs, and say like, oh, my boobs hit the steering wheel. You're like, what? Move your seat back.
Is that a problem girls have? I don't think it is.
It's an adjustable seat. I guarantee you can get your breasts out of the way of the steering wheel. And then, of course, they have to have a joke about Hinako being like, well, I could drive because I have tiny breasts. And like, oh my gosh, why is this happening?
And they have to cut to her. Well, during this, they have to cut to her, and we get a shot of her chest. And it's like, yeah, we can look at her, okay?
And then they don't leave the boob talk there, because eventually they do get to the hotel, and they decide that, they should take a bath. But Yayoi insists that while there is a private bath in their hotel room, we prefer the communal bath. Right? And basically telling the girls that they're all going to go bathe together, which of course they do, and they talk about how great it is to bathe together, and then they all comment on each other's boobs, and Hinako says that her boobs are small, just like Amy's, but Aoi's and Yoyoi's are bigger, and then they just have close-ups on all their breasts. Of course, because this
Now, I will say at the very least, because I know bathing in Japan, like the communal bath, it's a very different experience. It's not really seen as like, oh, it's bath time or anything. It's generally seen as being more of a relaxation.
I understand that, but it was still the scene only existed so that you could get close-ups of breasts.
Yeah, well, yeah, no. I mean, it was an excuse to get the girls nude in a series that's generally pretty quiet and tries to do fan service in more subtle ways. So we had to have our whole, okay, now they're bathing together. Yay, they're naked.
Yeah, everybody take a screen cap of this. Maybe there was just a lot of weird contradictions where they say that, everybody comes and they do this race because it has such great food, but it's also a bike race.
I thought that was really their motivation.
And they won't stop commenting on how Saki loves eating. And so like Saki's always like, she showed up early to the race just so she could eat, and she shows up early to dinner because that Saki, she sure loves eating. I'm like, is this a joke? What is this? What is the joke?
This is not an established character trait.
Yeah, also, even if it was,
it's like Yayoi being the gearhead, right?
Okay.
Like, this is not something that was ever established about her. Then all of a sudden she starts talking about all the parts of the bike, and it's like, this isn't a trait.
Exactly. You can just be like, oh boy, she sure likes eating. Similarly, at one point, Yayoi says, yeah, I mean, this race gets more popular every year. There's more people participating every year. And then shortly thereafter, she says, well, the participation is strictly limited, so only 1,500 people can race. So every year, like, there's more people who are on the wait list. And you're like, wait, so is it growing or is it set? Because you're contradicting yourself.
Right.
But
I guess maybe they had to start limiting it because it was growing. One thing I wanted to point out of that before we have to end this, there's something I don't, because it seems like the numbers that they get were sequential based on like when they ended up signing up. So Hinako and Yayoi have sequential numbers for one another, and Aoi and Amy have sequential numbers from one another, right? And Saki's is totally different, which is, fine. Except Saki's number is in between Yayoi and Hanako's and between Aoi's and Amy's number. Didn't she get there before all of them?
Well, I don't think it's about when you show up, it's about when you sign up. Like, when you register online.
Right, but
I also don't understand why all 5 of them weren't registered. Like, if they're doing it as a team, like, because this is a team competition, you have to have a group of 5, I thought. So, why wouldn't they all be sequential?
Yeah, like I don't understand it.
That goes for most of the show. I don't understand it. It's lazy. It's cheap. It's trying. They're trying to. They realize that they have a failed product because their animation budget fell apart. They can't afford to animate anything. They've missed 2 broadcast dates, so now they just announced that the last 2 episodes of the show are going to air in February. This show is falling apart, so they're relying on like big-breasted character models to try and sell merch and make up the costs of this disgusting failure. It truly only gets worse for me, this show. But yeah, fun week. Still loving doing this podcast, man.
Yeah, no, I'm having fun.
Yeah, aside from the vast stretches where I am not, because I have to watch these stupid shows. But
hey, Yuri and Haikyu and March Comes In Like a Lion are good, and all that's getting good.
Is good. Anyway, that is more than all the time we have, Matt. So, could you do me a favor and hit the credits?
No.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is koshiancast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.